cakes. Welcome back to Cooking and Cosplay. Today, it's actually you're gonna see two different outfits because it takes a long time for some things to settle and that kind of stuff. We'll be using a fridge and freezer again, so you're gonna see a little swap, but that's okay. For the first part here, I am cosplaying as one of my favorite Love Live girlies, Kana. She's from Aquas, and this outfit is just inspired by her solo Motone, one of my absolute favorites. So if you ever check out any of my other socials, you'll see a lot more pictures and the full cosplay to get a frame of reference more so than just a white dress. But anyway, to the bread and butter of what we're doing today. So we're gonna get the crumb coat going on our cake. So I just barely pulled it out of the freezer. You want that ice cold. So that way your frosting sticks to it really well and it absorbs it. Yeah, it keeps all the crumbs that we're gonna keep on there, so that way when we actually go to frost, everything will be nice and smooth. So I'm gonna start by showing you how to take the bags of frosting that we already prepared and actually get it ready for use. So we're gonna start with a new plastic bag and a piping tip. If you don't have one, you just need to cut the shape very carefully of whatever you're going for. So I usually put the piping tip in first just to get a reference for, like, you know, how well does it fit in the bag, where am I going to need to cut to get this to fit. Because you want it to be tight and snug, but not falling out. So it's always better to cut a little bit, and if you have to, cut a little bit more instead of starting with a big old cut. So then you'll try and push that on through, and then hopefully the piping tip stays in there, it's not falling out. I didn't cut it too big. Getting my favorite little cup ready so that way I can put the piping frosting in there. So I've had my bag out for, I want to say, about 30 minutes to an hour. Even that probably is a little too much, but that's okay. So we're also just gonna snippy snip on the frosting bag. Try and push some of the frosting back so that way it's not just leaking and falling right on out. Yeah, you can just put that bag right on in the old one. And now we have an at-home piping bag. So I'm going to start by on my little rotating table here. If you don't have one, a normal plate works too. You'll probably just either have to pick up and move the plate, or you're moving around the table. So starting with putting a little bit of frosting just right on the plate itself. That'll help the cake basically be glued on there so that the cake will stay. Alrighty, we got the big bad boy. So you can put it whichever side down you're most comfortable with. Usually the flat side works best though. And there we are. So for a crumb coat, we'll just put like a pretty thin layer on and smear it around. Usually one of these or something flat, like an actual, whoop, word just slipped my mind. Or one of these, just because it's straight and flat, it'll go around the cake very nicely. And you can just start spreading it around a little bit. We'll definitely want a little bit more going than that. So the sides work better using one of these than the spatula itself. I just like to get it started that way. And for this, you'll just press right up against the cake at like a slight angle, so that way it's spreading along with you. And you can always change the angle, so that way we're covering a little more lower, a little higher, whatever we feel like we're missing along the way. And we can always just go in, if there's little gaps, we can fill those in directly, which will help make that area a little bit smoother the next go around. Alright. And again. You don't want to apply too much pressure because then you're just scraping it instead of nicely like setting it onto the cake. If you ever start accumulating too much frosting, wipe it off either on a spatula. Some people just use the edge of the table. That way you can always pick it up and use it again, but when you don't want to keep dragging it along, you're not just taking it with you. It never hurts to get down on the cake's level so that way you can see exactly what's happening. And if you're worried about sanitation or anything, this is just parchment paper that I set over my table. So, I mean, you can also just have a clean workstation, but I just like the idea of parchment paper for easy cleanup. Alrighty. Alright, so once you're satisfied, everything's got a nice base layer on it. You can see the whole cake is covered. Yes, you'll still see a little bit of the cake. It's a crumb coat. It's just kind of like a nice protective layer. So that way when we're doing the full coat of frosting, that there's no chance of little black crumbs or anything. Or any crumbs depending on what cake you're making. In this case, it would be black because it's chocolate. But no matter what you're doing, that would be covered. So now, wrap up the cake, put it back in the fridge or freezer. Almost forgot to mention, if you're worried about, obviously, the plastic wrap or whatever you're using to kind of seal it up, if you're worried about that touching anything, toothpicks, popsicle sticks, kebab sticks, any of that is really helpful. Just stick a little bit in the top, so that way when you plastic wrap it, your frosting is totally safe. Alright, she's nice and wrapped up, ready for the fridge. So our next step is going to be working with the fondant. So you'll unbag whichever one you're about to work with. It's nice to have any of your supplies that you need ready. Really important to know how much you're gonna need. Like for this first part for white, I have on my list that I need 12 oval shapes to make whatever I need for this cake. So we're gonna work from our lightest colors all the way to our darkest colors. Again, just so we don't mix up any of our colors. So I'm just beginning by rolling this out. You want it pretty thin, but if you do it like paper thin, it's gonna tear and have holes in it. So you want it thick enough that you can still pick it up, but thin enough that it'll dry out. So before you start working, I have like a little bowl here with some cornstarch. Sprinkle a little bit on there, spread it around, so that way it doesn't stick to your work surface. Having a little on your hands as well as on your roller. I know it kind of seems a little silly that I didn't say it as I was doing it, but I thought I was recording. So, as you can tell, I bake. I'm not good with a camera. So when you're rolling, it's good to just pick it up again, start rolling from a different direction. It helps smoothen out any cracks and anything that start to form, and helps you keep it just an even size. And I'm using a bread roller. Yes, there are actual fondant rollers, but I don't have one. And I know not everyone would even have a bread roller at home. If you have like a smooth, perfectly round cup, kind of how you saw me just do that hand motion, it'll work just fine. And we can always ball it back up in a little bit here, but this is about as thin as I want to work with, just so I know it's not going to tear. So now we're going to cut out a bunch of little ovals. So if you have the means to do so, instead of taking a knife and cutting all the little circles, if you have any like tools around that could be helpful, that's awesome. So I'm going to use a really tiny piping tip that I have and use that almost basically like a cookie cutter just to get all my little shapes out. So as I took it out, I can see, I guess you might not be able to, but it's all really thick. So I'm actually going to roll these out just a little bit thinner before I keep going. So you don't want to start off rolling super hard or applying a lot of pressure, but like if you gotta, you know, get in there a little bit to make it as thin as you want. And you gotta do what you gotta do. Alright, try number 2. Yeah, that is a lot better. I didn't like that first guy. You can go in the go back pile, because we can re-roll this stuff later. So now, count to 12. As you can see, I did a little bit more than 12, but again, it's always better to have more than what you need. And then we can rumble it back up, put it back in the bag, because we're gonna need it later. So I did set the white circles onto a plate so that way they can dry out overnight, but I'm gonna wait to show you the plate with a color you can actually see, because the plate is white, so it's just not gonna work well. So we're gonna move on to our next color. As boring as it is, yellow, I also just need a bunch of circles for. So I'm going to use the same piping tip because they're small, except for I need one big one, so I'm just going to flip it and use the other side. So if you don't still have some cornstarch on the table, sprinkle a little bit down, rub it around, make sure you got some on your hands, on your roller, and we're ready to go. Alrighty, so a different technique now, because we're going to be using the molds instead for our pink rather than just cutting out little circles. So lightly, because we are going to use it multiple times and it should be already pretty good to work with, I'm just going to touch my finger in the cornstarch, rub it just a tiny bit in there, and instead of rolling this one out, we're literally just going to break off a tiny piece, like a tiny little baby piece, and we're gonna fit it in there. And then say if I didn't grab enough, which I actually didn't, you can still tear more off. Think of it like Play-Doh, you can mash it back together and all that good stuff. You want to shape it on the outside as well. The mold does the inside, but you want to make sure it fits from the outside. And then once you get it just the way you want it in there, you should just be able to, just pop it out. Can I have you, friend? Trying to be as careful as possible, but still be able to show you. And it comes out, ooh, right in the same little flower shape. And we're just going to add it to our little drying plate. And not every flower is going to turn out perfect, and it's okay to just ball it up, shove it back in there again. I need 19 of these bad boys. While I'm just kind of working away, I'm getting some of these flowers going, because it's just going to be that same repetitive process. I don't feel the need to get all of that on camera. But I would just like to say, I noticed from my last video that I did gain a couple of new subscribers, and I think that's so cool. I'm not sure if you just organically came across me and you were just like, oh, that's interesting, or if you're one of my lovely friends from Instagram who kind of transferred your way over. I super love and appreciate you guys, so thank you so much. Alrighty, so now we got all of our little flowers and our little circles. I use the exact same mold for the blue ones because they're going to be the exact same flowers in the cake. So I'm going to set this off to the side because we're back to rolling. So for anything that you don't have like just like a mold for, like for these little bird fins, fins are not what they're called for birds, but for some of the feathers, I don't have anything that I can use to like be like, oh, this is going to work to punch it out. So we're going to roll it and just cut it with a knife. An X-Acto knife works the best for this, but otherwise your sharpest little kitchen knife is a-okay. Just be careful. I guess be careful with any of that sharp object. A tip in rolling, you don't want to do like a back and forth like this. You want to go all the way to the end of whatever it is until you completely drop off. Otherwise, it'll be small bump wherever you just stop at. Then we pick it up, change the angle, and then we can keep spreading our shape. Alrighty, so once we get everything all set up on our nice little plate, everybody is all nice and ready to just be dried out. Once it's all dried out, we can start applying it to the cake, but we gotta wait. It takes several hours for ponchit to dry, so sometimes just literally leaving it overnight or like a full 24 hours even. It's just for the best to just patiently wait. So I will catch up with you later. Just gonna snip, and we'll see a new person. But costume change a little later in the day so we can continue on from our crumb coat. So we got it on the fridge. We're just gonna get going again. And if you're wondering who this cosplay is, this from Genshin Impact, thought I should finish on, you know, the series that this cake is from. So we've got our cake. We'll unwrap it to get it ready to continue frosting. Ooh, put that in a little hard. Alright, so we got it unwrapped. Now we can continue frosting. Got our same purple frosting that we used before, and we're going to do just about the same process, just thicker now. This tool isn't really any different than the one I was using last time. They are like the same thing, just one's plastic and one's metal. So that is a great example of watching how much pressure you're applying, because my piping tip fell out. But that's okay. We don't need it for shape or anything right now. So we're just keep going with just a hole in the bag. There we start with that and see how it's going. Starting in the center and working your way slowly out kind of helps push some of that frosting out, so that way you can wrap it around the sides. I don't want that center to get too built up either. You can fill in any of those spots where you felt it was a little light on the frosting. Okay, so once you get it completely coated and you're happy with the end results, we're going to work on some of our other decorations. So I'm actually going to shove that back in the fridge. I'm not going to wrap it up because we're going to start plopping decorations on real soon here. So to start with our decorations, we have our little cake pops. So we want to start by rolling those in whatever color fondant we need, so that way we can apply the decorations that we put last time. So to do that, we're going to have our cornstarch to roll it out real thin to wrap the balls, and we have like a small cup of cold water just to do a little dab, so that way we can connect the dried fondant to our new fondant. Oh, my fondant is starting to get dry. Set you over there for now. Alright, so I got this super thin. I'm going to cut it in half because I need at least 2 of these balls. So I'll take our ball, put it right in the center, and we'll start just rolling it up. Since fondant is kind of, like I said, kind of like Play-Doh, it's very malleable. You can kind of just get it exactly how you want it. Tear off any excess, and you can just kind of pat any of those little spaces. If cracks start to form, you can pat them back together. And it's okay if like one part of it's kind of not looking as pretty as the rest, because as I've learned, that every cake has a back, and everything has a bottom. So it's going to be set down like that, so no one's going to see that messed up part. So as long as majority of it looks all nice and round and pretty, you're good to go. And we'll do this for all the colors that we need. So one of the flowers we need is going to be half colors. So I literally just ripped off the chunk of fondant, half and half, before I start rolling it. And for that, once you roll your ball, if there's any like pattern you need on the ball itself, do that part right away while it's still malleable and it hasn't started to dry out at all. Perfect by no means, but once we get them all wrapped up, we're going to let that sit. We're going to go back to the cake so that way they just have a little time to dry out, so that way we can put our nice little accessories on. So before I head in with my next color, it's kind of helpful to have a little guide. Just take like a toothpick or a fork or a little something, just a knife, to put out an area so that way I know this is the shape that I'm going for with the yellow. When piping, if you have any like little air bubbles and stuff, that's why your lines won't be perfectly straight. As well as if you have any parts that stick up, just dabbing like your finger in some water and patting it down so that way it can get like, you don't have any like parts sticking straight up, like boop boop boop, and then it'll go down. Again, this is just a little at-home project. It doesn't have to be perfect. No one's paying me for it. It's just a thing that I wanted to do for myself. Alright, to apply some of these things, like our little flowers and stuff, what we're going to do is, for each one, we'll pick it up, dab a little bit of water on the back, and then you'll be able to press it on top. So once you're ready, just start placing the cake balls, on the cake. I wasn't recording because I wanted to look at my reference photos, see where things went, but everything placed out pretty well. And you can still see some of those lines that I made earlier, but my balls are a little large, so it kind of covered some of it, but all in all, not bad at all. My last step is now just going to be adding that banner across the side, which I never rolled out. Alrighty, and we are all done. So give it a nice spin, make sure you're satisfied with it. So my cake is missing the fan. That's why I said to always make extra of things when you're rolling fondant. I did break it, and I didn't make an extra because I was like, oh, the fan's big, it'll be fine. Bigger was easier to break, but it's a-okay, because I was doing purely fondant and wasn't gonna fucking eat that anyway, so we have our cake. And so you can get a closer look. All our little friends. Hope it's just as tasty. Alright, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. We're not singing, we're the birthday people.
Yeah, you ready?
I'm waiting to sing it.
I've been recording.
Oh, okay.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Laura. Happy birthday to you. Cha cha cha. And many more. Yay!
I was like, let me angle it. I was like,
good job.
I go in. I mean, if you want just one of the cake balls, you can do that.
I can do that?
Yeah.
I want this chicken.
The chicken.